Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 168 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, wherever you are doing so. I want to say a special thanks to Emma Jane Leeson for coming on last week. We spoke about loads of stuff, but we spoke in particular about her work as a children's author, the Johnny McGorry series, if you haven't checked it out yet. We also talked about animals and nature, and then she's getting the retreat going, and I'm going to get it right. It's Balnafa. I kept getting it wrong when we were talking, but it's Balnafa in Kildare. So go have a look at all that stuff and see what you think. You can support us on Buy Me a Coffee if you want. If you don't, that's all right. Link is in the description anyway. Let's get on to this week. I guess this week is a creative mindfulness kids practitioner. Her name is Bernie Woods. How you doing, Bernie?
Hi, Derek. How's it going? Thanks so much for having me on.
You're more than welcome. I have to point out, and I know you know this because I only put a post up about it. This is my first time, so they can't take this away from me, Bernie. All right, this is the first time this podcast has been recorded outside of my bedroom. So you're the one who's been in Dublin with me, kind of like, you know, at least digitally. And it's weird, right? I was thinking about this the other day. We were talking about it with a friend, and I don't look in the mirror. Okay, I don't know if you look in the mirror. I'm sure everybody looks in the mirror, right? This isn't a thing now, by the way, Bernie. I'm going off on a tangent, but this isn't a thing where I'm like consciously not looking in the mirror. I just don't look in the mirror. I walk past and so look, I don't have any hair to comb. I've got just not much of a beard to worry about. And I set this camera up and I thought, this is the brightest room in the world. And I can just see all stuff that, you know, am I this gray? You know, kind of a stuff, but I'm going to push that away, push that aside. And not worry about it too much, because this is the only time I actually look at myself. So I'll focus on you, Bernie, all right?
Oh, thank you. I feel privileged now.
Oh, just stop it. Right, so come here. Right, you know, we always start in the same place. Can you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Well, I'm from Mullinavat, which is a little village in South Kilkenny. I grew up on a farm. I'm from a family of 8. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, so I was in the middle. And I have such fond memories of growing up on the farm, just being out all the time. And I think that's where my love for the outdoors even comes through to today as well. So I have such lovely memories of being outside, just playing outside. We reared lambs, we had pet lambs that we used to battlefield and feed, and it just brings me such joy remembering those memories.
It's so strange. Last week I was just saying we're on this run of people coming on who grew up on farms or in the country, you know, in the countryside. And you're another now, and it's like I think there's about 5 in a row. But I get that, like, and I've kind of addressed it last week as well. But I see it now, living on a farm now, which I didn't do, and I just see how great and kind of peaceful that would have been if I was a youngster, you know.
And the freedom and just to be just out and about, and we used to just go exploring down through the fields, and we used to just use our imaginations, and we just loved it. And there were so many of us. There was always somebody to play with and to
like 6 kids is a fair amount. Like, you're never stuck. Could you give us like an idea of when you first became aware of mental health?
Upon reflection, I don't really remember it being spoken about really when I was in primary or secondary school. It was kind of in my late 20s, early 30s that I felt there was much more conversations about it and much more of an awareness about mental health and well-being. I suppose I became quite aware of my own well-being and my own mental health and the importance of looking after myself as well. And secondly, I'm a primary school teacher, and I have seen firsthand the importance of equipping children with coping mechanisms to actually help them with their own well-being and their own mental health. So it's kind of been 2-tiered for me, but it was in later years.
That's obviously when I want to talk to you about what you do as a teacher, which is maybe slightly different from other teachers, but what was it that kind of drew you to the profession, and why primary school?
When I was in primary school myself, I really enjoyed it.
Right.
I loved learning, and I really enjoyed learning. And as I was growing up, so many people were saying to me, "Oh, you'd be such a good teacher." And then when I kind of thought about it, I thought, "Oh, I actually would like to do this." And when I was in transition year, I got the opportunity to actually do work experience
Ah,
in a local school, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then it came to filling out my CAO, and it was between teaching and journalism. I
mhm.
love writing, and I still write poetry. So it's great that I can actually bring the two into my teaching, and the teaching won out in the end. So I went to Dublin to St. Pat's,
Yeah.
and I started my training in 2003, and then I qualified in 2006.
As someone who hasn't, stood in front of a class of youngsters, when you first started, I suppose is the best. I know you did a bit of work experience, but when you are the teacher, um, is that incredibly daunting? Was it just because you said you wanted to do it? Did it just feel like the right fit?
Um, That's a really interesting question. It actually felt like the right fit, and
Right.
it still does. Children are just amazing. They are so open-minded, just willing to learn, creative, and their imaginations are just fantastic. And to be in a classroom and facilitate and teach, it's amazing.
And I mean, that's what a parent wants to hear their child's teacher say,
Mhm.
because it's just that whole thing of I guess it's of as parents handing over their kids when they're quite small rather than being teenagers and heading into fifth, sixth year, whatever it be, like there has to be a high level of trust and a high level of like um I guess hope that the teacher is really enthusiastic about what they do rather than just there to kind of collect a bit of money. And I'm not saying that's what teachers do, but just in general, like that, the idea that a teacher is there for that reason, for the kids, to teach them. I think that's, exactly what a teacher needs to hear. So when I first came across you was on Instagram, and we were talking a bit about social media earlier on, but like, where did you hear of this creative mindfulness for kids, that idea?
I'm actually through Instagram. For the
Ah,
last few years, it has been a dream of mine to work with small groups of children and just explore, just have conversations with them, open discussions, explore coping mechanisms, help them build self-esteem, help them build self. So that would have always been a dream of mine.
mhm.
So in October 2020, I decided to set up an Instagram account where I would just share ideas and connect with different people. And the original name of their Instagram account was Believe in Yourself,
Right.
BIY, but
Okay.
maybe it was a nod to myself to actually have belief in what I wanted to achieve. So I had that Instagram account, but I wasn't really posting on it.
Mhm.
And then that Christmas, I just kind of sat down and I thought, what do I want to? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to create? What would I would love to do? And I changed the name to the Meaningful Moon Tour.
Mhm.
And it was as if I found where I wanted to be. And I just started posting different things and I started connecting with different people. And then people that I was connecting with actually were doing the creative mindfulness training. And some of them had been trained already as creative mindfulness practitioners. And it just kind of snowballed from there. That was the December, and then I signed up for the course in April, and then I was qualified July,
Now,
and it was just
eh,
amazing.
yeah, but and this is the thing because this is such a broad question, and I apologize for it. But for
Okay.
people, yeah, but for people who don't know what that is, what it entails, could you just give us a run through of the, I suppose the idea of bringing that creative mindfulness to kids? Because I think a lot of people will understand it as adults that we've kind of sought out this kind of ways to look after ourselves mindfully and stuff like that. But maybe for kids, it's going to be something completely different.
So creative mindfulness is a method designed by Louise Shanahan,
Hmm.
and she is who I trained under. And the creative mindfulness approach is teaching mindfulness to children through fun and creative ways. So introducing mindfulness to children through creativity. So stories, creative art activities, visualizations, meditation. And part of it is to teach children how to be compassionate towards themselves as well, self-compassion, dealing with calming a busy mind. So it's actually giving children the coping mechanisms that will actually stand them throughout their lives.
Brilliantly summed up, I would say.
Oh,
But
thank you.
what is, kind of fascinating about that to me, and the reason I wanted to have you on was because I've talked about my own mental health on here, and the idea of like something like a racing mind, and we've all
Yeah,
had it.
yeah,
I would like to have. It's I know it's looking back and kind of stuff that wasn't there, but I would have loved to have seen what I'm like now if I had the result, like those kind of skills in primary school, and you do hear about it coming into secondary school more so, I'd say, but I think there might have been a certain, maybe bit of a lag with the idea of bringing it to kids, just because of the fact that maybe the kids, we think that the kids won't grasp on to something like that, that maybe it's too much for them. But what you were saying about like bringing stories to it and stuff, that because you put it brilliantly with the idea of kids as they have such great imaginations. They're able to take in that kind of stuff
yeah,
better than we are, probably, because we have these restrictions and these walls up that we don't want to play around with. But the kids take all this on so well, and I think they're perfectly suited for this kind of model, I think. When like so when you start with kids now, what age group is, not just you, but what age group would the initial course be, starting with?
Well, I'm qualified from 4 to 12 year olds, so
Right.
primary school. But Louise has courses available for preschool, for adults, for teenagers. So you can train in all those levels. Um, yeah, and it's just amazing. And what you said about the children, um, I have witnessed firsthand the openness in this,
Hmm.
and I have I have introduced to children that have no experience of mindfulness or have some experience of mindfulness. And it's just amazing to see the progression over the few weeks. I have brought it into my own school. I teach in different settings in children's resource centres, in family centres, in children after school centres. And it's just it's an absolute privilege for me to get to work with all these children and introduce this concept to them.
So from four is kind of is
Yeah,
great.
from
Like,
four, yeah,
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 the very kind of beginnings of primary school, I guess.
yeah.
Do you think that it's possible that this, because obviously it should, but do you think it's possible that this could become a wider thing, to schools around the country?
I think it is. There's
Yeah.
so many of us trained in it at the moment. There's people all over the world doing Louisa's training, and it's amazing because we actually have a lovely group. We meet, if we want, we can meet 4 times a week virtually. So we meet on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and do mindfulness practices ourselves, led by Louise or one of the other advisors. And then on a Thursday, we have an hour session where we can ask different questions, talk to different practitioners, and we are sharing ideas. And there's so many of us trained at the moment and in training. And as well as that, Louise and a colleague of ours, they actually wrote and published a book for primary school age, the Mindful Heart curriculum. So it's
Right.
actually 10 lessons that teachers can actually teach to their class based on different levels, introducing the creative mindfulness approach to the children.
Uh,
Louise and Paul McNamee.
so with that, like, so this is going to kind of maybe dig into it a little bit deeper, but the idea of um my idea of mindfulness. Now, we're taking this into account. I was maybe 30 when I started to kind of
Okay.
hear about mindfulness,
Yeah.
and I was probably thinking, oh, that's very hippyish. Probably at the time, that's what I was thinking. Now, it means an awful lot to me, because when I broke down, like I was saying earlier on, with these walls and these restrictions that we put up for ourselves, when I looked into it properly and I figured out like what could work for me. And then I go, deep breathing techniques, would that work for me? Journaling, would that work for me? Or not deep water, cold water swimming, that kind of stuff. And you try and figure out, you try to find ways. And I'm guessing that's kind of the same for the kids. Some kids are going to grasp onto things a bit more than, like one kid would maybe grasp onto storytelling, and one might be art. What I try to imagine, I can't remember it, it's so long ago, but when I was in primary school, when I was 4 or 5, what we were doing, like, is it the idea of, if we're asked to paint a picture, are we given a specific, topic or thing to paint that kind of brings forth that mindfulness? Or is it literally put the paper down, here's a paintbrush, and allow them to be as creative as they want to be and let them be in that moment, and that's the mindfulness?
Both would work, but the
Right.
way we do it is that we actually have a specific concept or a specific idea that we're introducing. It could be calming a busy mind or dealing with difficult emotions. So we will have an art activity with that. But the way I work it is, especially with the older children, I would show them something that I have created, and we would explore the message and we'd go through different things. But then I would give them leeway to use their own creativity, and the art activities that have come back are just fantastic. And to see the children, I like just to sit back for a moment sometimes and just look around and see, and they are so in it, and it's just magical to
Mhm.
witness. And I'm just finishing a group now next week of I keep the group small, so a group of 6 children, and we were actually doing it in a sensory room in a children's centre, and it was just fabulous. We used to turn down the lights, we used to put on, they had all different shape lighting and different things in it, and then we were on the ground and we'd all blankets on the ground and mats, and just to witness it, the children they really enjoyed it. And I could feel they were understanding mindfulness more and more, because I think sometimes when people think of mindfulness, they think, oh, of meditation,
Mm.
meditation, meditation. Meditation is part of it, but you can be mindful in every single moment. And being in the moment allows us to experience more joy and leads to a more fulfilled life. And I have witnessed that firsthand in my own life.
That's a really great point, because that would have been one thing for me, thinking when, I first heard about mindfulness and stuff, meditation, oh, that must be top of the list. And then I saw, like, I really tried it. I gave it a good go. I've mentioned a few times this podcast, but I gave it a good solid go. But I kind of gave up, and then I thought, well, that's kind of, if I can't do that part of mindfulness, there's nothing else. Now, this is just me
Yeah.
at the time. But then, like, I was really, just even yesterday, right? So I'm in Dublin at the moment, but even I had really racing mind and couldn't kind of settle or anything. So I went for a walk, and I went down by the beach, kind of, um, and the tide was coming in, so I had literally about that to walk on, but it was a long walk, and I was thinking the tide's creeping in, creeping in. I started to freak out at the end, but that's not really the point. But the point was, at the start of it, it was just that idea of, there was no one around, like, and it was just the sea was here, and it was the sky, it was blue sky, and everything was kind of set up for that. And it's kind of those moments where I kind of, threw away that idea of it's just about meditation. So I can understand for you bringing to the kids, even that kind of lying down, and just maybe that's the time to rest the mind and talk kids through it and stuff. Because I think what I was getting hung up on before I started writing the questions for you was the fact that the creative mindfulness, I was putting them two together and not separating them at all. Like, in that, like, there can be creativity on one level and, mindfulness there, but it could be, lying down and trying to chill the mind out. That's what I like about the idea of it, is that there's a bit of work and a bit of rest to it as well.
And it's to bring an awareness to the children to actually be aware of themselves in that particular moment. Because I think with everything at the moment, that sometimes we can be so overstimulated by things,
Mm-hmm.
but just to bring ourselves back to the moment and actually use our senses to ground ourselves, what do I see? What do I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? I can just be in this moment right now.
Um, there was another kind of, um, it's kind of like you mentioned, hugely positive thing to be addressing at such a young age. It is because it's. I've like that question that I ask. I've asked every guest who's come on about when did you first become aware of mental health, and look, depending on the age of the person or the demographic or whatever it might have been, it's always a different answer. But I found like in a lot of them, the cases would it be where I would have answered would have been similar to yours, that it came a little bit later. To me, it probably came too late. But I do think that a lot of people will say in secondary school, I was anxious, but I had no idea what anxiety was. So I didn't have anything to kind of go by. And I just thought, well, this is the way teenagers are supposed to be, which is a shame. It's kind of sad to hear someone speak like that. But if we bring this to kids at the age of like 4 and, start progressing through that, I like to think that, by the time kids are 13 and 14 and are struggling as teenagers, that their awareness it's not even just about having the tools, but it's about knowing what it is and stepping forward and saying to their parents or to their friends or whoever it might be, look, I'm struggling a bit.
And to have the words to do that,
Yeah.
yeah, to actually, because I would have a lot of discussions with the children as well about, our bodies gives us signs. Sometimes we mightn't be able to verbalize something, but yeah, as you said, our mind might be racing, our heart is pounding. So if we can actually tune into those signs and say, okay, how am I feeling right now in my body? How do I feel? And then it gives us signs to actually what is actually going on. But if children are, and us as well, and me, if I notice the signs as they're coming, I can actually use the tools in my toolkit, my deep breathing, my awareness practices, journaling, going for a jog, going for a run, reaching out, talking to somebody. I can use one of those tools to actually help me process this emotion.
Absolutely. And, I think what's also brilliant about it is, and I like a bit of art and stuff. I can't say I'm an expert at it, but I do enjoy a bit of art and kind of, I like the idea of the creativity side as well, because which, the kind of conscious art, the conscious creativity, it's not like just scribbling all over the place. Whereas that's grand. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I like the idea of, especially like kind of where we are in Ireland and stuff like that, to have more creativity coming out, like people to grasp onto how important art is, but how fun it is, like, like, because for me, and I know we'll get on to yourself with your writing and stuff, but I think for me growing up, I don't remember, I'm sure I did it in school, obviously painting and stuff, but it was obviously something passed me by. Now I like writing and things like that, but I think that, like, every time I see someone painting, I'm like, that looks deadly. And still, I don't do it. I have this, and again, it's the walls of restrictions that I don't mean to repeat myself over and over, but like, I think this is going to be crap. If I write a song, okay, now this is a perfect example, Bernie. So if I write a song, I think to myself, I play it once, I go, that's all right. I play it twice, I'm like, and then third time, it's crap. And it's immediately, but I like to think that if people are like introduced to art in that sense, like conscious art and painting and drawing and stuff, I do think that will stick with them a little bit more, and they will be more confident in themselves too.
And there's no real rules. Whatever they create, it's their creativity. So I just put out everything in the middle, and they kind of just look, and I said, have a look and see what you would like to use. And I'd show them the different things, and I show them what I'm after using. And it's very rare that they would copy what I have done. Exactly. They would just look at what they see. And I just think it's amazing. And I love taking pictures of the work, and sometimes I try and take a few pictures sometimes, but I want to be in the
Of
moment with
course,
them
yeah.
as well. And I try and take some pictures just for examples, then to show other people, to show other children their creativity. But sometimes I don't get a chance to take pictures, but it's so interesting. Some of the children sometimes will make an extra little one for me and say, "Oh,
Ah,
Bernie, you keep that to show your next group."
which is lovely.
Which I just think is
Yeah.
fabulous. Yeah, yeah.
Um, do you ever? This is, you don't have to answer this, but have you ever seen a piece of art and thought, like, that is great, but you can't, like, because you have to be part of, you can't show any kind of favoritism towards the art because everybody's like, as you said, there's no rules. Like, and I'm only saying from your perspective, seeing something that's really brilliant, can you go, that's really brilliant? Or do you just kind of keep everybody kind of, no, they're all really good?
Well, to be honest, everything has been brilliant that has come to me. And I know
That's
that like,
political. That's a
yeah,
beautiful
no,
answer.
it's not. No, it has, because it's coming from the heart
Yeah.
and it's unique to them. And I just think, every single one of them, they do blow me away when I look at them, because I can see part of the child in it.
Mm-hmm.
The colors they like, the shapes they like. Sometimes they bring in their favorite characters, or someone that they love comes into their art activity, and it's just so amazing to see. And then that is a talking point, because they bring home that art activity
Mm-hmm.
with the message that we've spoken about to whoever's at home, and then they get to talk about it as well. And it's good, it's kind of a cue then for the parents or for the adult or whoever's at home with them. Oh, what did you do today? And it just opens up so many conversations, and it's so important that the children know that they are listened to and know that they are heard, because their
Yeah.
voice matters too.
Yeah, and I, to be honest, I think that is the right answer, though. Like, if there was a right or wrong answer, I don't know, but I do.
Well, thank you.
No, I know, but I think it's exactly hitting the nail on the head, and I wouldn't have thought of it that way. But it is about the the person,
Yeah,
the creation that they've made, not about the skills or the talents, whatever it might be, um, especially not as kids. Like, it shouldn't be about that kind of, let's immediately introduce some competitiveness to the, because that, like, I've always, and I've talked about this, but I don't like competitive stuff. It's not for me. It has to be done at the Olympics, for instance, or else there's no point. But, like, we're not dealing in the Olympics every day. And I do think that to add the competitiveness, I think it takes away some of that fun, like, and that like sense of freedom. I think if someone like Dali decided, like, I'm going to paint like just portraits instead of doing all the other stuff, I think we would have missed an awful lot of great art. So I do think that everybody should be allowed to have their own expression and expansion of their mind or whatever it might be. But coming to that, like, so when you're talking about storytelling, and you said you like writing and stuff like that, do you remember when you were quite young, when you were these kids' age, do you remember that kind of the art in the class or the storytelling and things like that?
I remember the storytelling. Yeah, I remember some of that art, but what stands out for me the most is the poetry. And I
Right.
think it's because that I just love doing it now, and I really enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm.
My first memory of doing poetry is third or fourth class, and sometimes you remember a teacher, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember that teacher, and I always thought that's who I would aspire to be like, because
All right.
he was just so nurturing, and so the poetry, because he did so much poetry with us. And I remember he was the one that introduced us to limericks.
Right.
And I remember writing a limerick as a 5-line poem, and the first line, the second line, and the fifth line rhyme, and then the third and the fourth line rhyme, but they're a little bit humorous.
Yeah.
And he gave us the first line: down behind the dustbin, I met a man called whoever, and you had to
Right.
say it. And I just remember the joy I felt reading other people's poems, the joy I felt writing my own one. And it was just as if this whole new world just opened out to me. And it was from that moment my poetry, my love for poetry started, and it has brought me such joy throughout my life. So that's what I remember the most about primary school. That's where my poetry started.
I remember that, not that early, but I do remember poetry coming into it maybe in secondary school. It
Yeah.
would have been there earlier, but what I remember, and I do remember, like, right from when it came in, like when it was the whole September 1916. Is that what it is? Is that the line? I can't remember. Is that the line? September 1916, 14, 16. Oh, so my mom and my dad are going to be very disappointed in me. But
No, I
anyway,
don't know now. I
it's
probably
yeah.
know it now to read it. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Yates, but that could also be
Yeah.
wrong. But but so from that to sixth year, I remember people, like, even in the junior or the leaving cert, like, that was the big bogey thing, the poetry, because I think it was harder to Was it harder to understand? Maybe it wasn't, but like we were reading Shakespeare, and
Mm.
that was hard to understand unless it was broken down by a teacher. But like, when you're writing an essay, or you're, something like that, or short story, we used to write them. I used to think they were much easier than the poetry.
Yeah,
I found it hard to connect to the. Could you, like, obviously it would have got harder for you as you went along, but
yeah.
was it? And this is kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Was your introduction, because it was quite early to poetry? Did it help you to kind of find it easier in secondary school to understand the more deeper poetry that came along?
Yeah, and there was such an enjoyment in it for
Mm.
me. I loved to see what else does the poet mean here. Um, yeah, I loved to remember, I loved reading Sylvia Plath. That's who I studied for my leaving. Now, if you asked me a poem, I couldn't remember, but I just remember, yeah, her poetry, and there was so much more poetry then that I really enjoyed, and I really loved learning about it and trying to find the hidden meanings,
Mm.
because sometimes poetry for me is a coping mechanism that, say if I'm upset by something or if I'm really happy about something, I would just grab a journal. I have so many diaries. I have so many notebooks. I go everywhere, even when I go on holiday. Oh, I went away for a night the other night. There was a notebook in my bag. Just take it out, and I mightn't know exactly what's going on I might feel whatever way. And then
Mhm.
when I start writing, I actually just see, oh, this is what's going on, or
Yeah.
this is what's really happening here. And then I have a poem at the end of it, and it's just, yeah, it's really helpful to me.
Was it when you start writing poetry, and having the journals of poetry and filled like that? Was it just for yourself, that poetry, or was it something that you always kind of wanted to? Did you want to get it published? Did you read it to people, or was it just for yourself?
A bit of both. It brought
Mm.
me such joy myself, so that's why I started doing it. But then, as I was in as a primary school teacher, and now as a creative mindfulness practitioner for children as well, I use my poetry when I want to teach. When I want to teach children something, or if I want to open a conversation with something, I will write a poem myself if I can't find one, and just write that myself and use that then in my classes. I use so many of them in my mindfulness classes, and I use them in school as well, especially when I was teaching the younger children. I used to use my poetry as well. So it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I have started sharing more and more of my poetry on my Instagram and on my website as well.
Um, I have looked that up, by the
Mm.
way, and and that was another thing that I kind of wanted to ask you was like, if, like you say, like if you are having maybe a tough time, or you're having a bad day,
Yeah,
and you want to write about, you want to, maybe not that you want to write about it, but you want to write something. You're obviously not just writing poems for yourself too, because you are writing poems like for kids, like that
yeah,
you can read
yeah,
to kids.
I do.
So
Yeah.
does that, like, because that to me it sounds quite difficult to kind of switch between the two. How do you know what's good is the wrong word, but how do you know what's kind of suitable for the kids? What, like, how would you put it out there? Because when you're writing unconsciously and consciously are completely separate things, really.
It's the different voices for me. It's
Right,
the child voice and then the adult voice.
right.
So when I'm writing for a child, I imagine, being a child myself again, and just, or relating to some of the children that I actually work with, and what language would appeal to them.
Hmm.
And sometimes some of the poems that I have, and people have said it to me, that I've written with children in mind and children really relate to it, that actually adults have said as well, that actually really helps me too. And I can
Ah,
relate to the simplicity of it. Um,
you
so
see,
so at the moment it's more the poetry that I put up on my page is more for children, because that's who I'm kind of working with at the moment. But I would put up maybe affirmations or maybe 4 lines of a rhyme or something with a message.
Mhm.
I put up one there a little while ago about feeling aligned in our body and our mind. I can't think offhand now, but it was something for adults. So yeah, I kind of mix between the two depending on where I'm at.
uh, the simplicity thing is great, because I find, um in music, some of the simplest melodies and songs and tunes and all that, are the ones you remember the
Yeah,
most.
most, yeah.
But they also, and this is one thing that I notice, if I'm like in a certain headspace, I'm not going to turn on something that's kind of confusing, like has confusing harmonies or mad time signatures and all this stuff. It might just be 4/4 in a time signature. It's got three chords and a repeated kind of phrase in the middle. And sometimes you just need that kind of reassurance. And what you said about the parents seeing something like that simple and it's sticking in their mind. We do sometimes disregard it. We think that like we shouldn't be paying attention to kind of stuff that's maybe directed a little bit towards kids and so, and it's a silly thing really, because why are we cutting out like so many things that could be good for our minds, you know?
Because all these coping mechanisms that I'm actually teaching with the children, I use myself as
Mm.
an adult. You know, the breathing, the counting down, being in the moment, feeling your feet on the ground. You know, if I was feeling overwhelmed or if I was feeling anxious about something, that's exactly what I would do. I'd use my senses to ground me. I'd focus on a sound. I'd focus on my breath. I'd check in, see how I feel in my body. And all my poetry is based around that and about, you know, managing our emotions.
So you mentioned Sylvia Plath, and you
Yes.
know, I obviously a great
Yeah.
writer and poet. Is there any other kind of artists or writers that kind of inspired you as you were growing up, or even now? Because look, we're still looking for inspiration wherever we can find it, really.
Well, there's so many
Mm.
incredible people around at the moment. I'm so inspired by other creative mindfulness practitioners as well
Right.
that they're doing. Obviously, I'm really inspired by Louise Shanaher, my mentor. She is just amazing that she has rolled out and brought this creative mindfulness method to so many people, and it will help, and it is helping so many people. There's a lady, Fiona Foreman. She is
Right.
Fiona Foreman Wellbeing. I don't know if you came across her before. She actually has published different books for primary schools based for the SPHE curriculum, but it's linked with positive psychology. So it's
Oh.
equipping children with mechanisms as well for to deal with different emotions and self-esteem and confidence, different things. So Fiona would be somebody I'd really look up to and influence as well. Be
And yeah, and I when you talk about mindfulness and maybe talk about you know yourself with regards to like you say, you use a lot of the skills that you teach the kids. Like, um, was that something? Did that come before then for you? Did you learn of mindfulness before you kind of found Louise Shanahan and stuff like that?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
I came across mindfulness maybe say 8 to 10 years ago,
okay.
and I went to a workshop with Rodrigo Mueron, and he had published a book. Someone had given me one of his books they had recommended, so that's where mindfulness started for me. And then I attended different workshops in the teacher centre with people that were doing mindfulness
Mhm.
in the classroom. There's different mindfulness activities and different mindfulness resources available for the classroom and for schools. So I've been doing it for maybe 8 to 10 years. But it was
Yes.
only when I started the course that my practice became a daily practice. I was
Right.
kind of dipping in and out of mindfulness.
Yeah, it's an interest. Mindfulness is such an interesting thing because there's so many ways
There's so many
to
ways, yeah.
practice it,
Yeah.
and like I said, like I was too quick to give up, thinking I can't do that, right, and giving up, or I can't do this and giving up. There was no kind of I wasn't giving myself a chance, and I think it took me maybe a year to get into it and realize there's actually far more than three ways.
Oh,
to,
there's
you
so
know,
many ways,
there
yeah.
is, and you know, and I can incorporate things that I love, such as music
Yeah,
or
music, that would be a
yeah,
great one. Yeah.
um, you know, look, this podcast has helped an awful lot. Like we've had
Yeah.
people on, like yourself, and people who have talked about mindfulness in different ways, you know, and the different ways we can use it. It has helped an awful lot. But it took me a while to open my mind to it. I'm guess I think of what it is, and even like sometimes it's just sitting down watching a film for me can be mindfulness because I'm just
Yes,
that
yeah.
like you know,
Anything, yeah.
I think
Anything can be a mindfulness activity.
yeah,
Anything can be. You know, us talking at the moment because
yeah,
we're really concentrating on what each other's are saying, or mindful eating, mindful walking, all of that. And I try and introduce that to my children in school as well. And
Hmm.
every morning in school, I would do a check-in with them. I would see, okay, everybody, let's just check in with ourselves and see how we feel. And there's an optional share if they want to share how they feel.
Hmm.
And it was actually an idea that a colleague had given to me a few years ago that she had used, and I have been using it ever since, on a scale of 1 to 10, where you kind of say, you show on the fingers, you show on your fingers what how you are on a scale of 1 to 10. So, but I will never ask a child, oh, why are you a 2, or why are you?
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
never put a child under. They can share if they want. And I have always said at the start, look, if you do put up one finger, I will check in informally with you at some stage just to check if you're okay.
yeah.
But I'll never make a deal about it. So it's different activities like that as well. Even a check-in with yourself, that's being mindful, being aware of yourself.
And they're always open to it. Like it's just it always like
Yeah. And I think it's because that I embody it myself.
yeah,
I live by it myself, and they can see that. And I try to be really authentic about it. I
yeah.
try, and it has helped me so much, and it has actually led my life to being more fulfilled. And it has been really, really life changing for me, mindfulness, over the years. And it has, I am actually happier myself.
All right.
I'm happier in the moment. Yeah, I'm happier in the moment.
That's it's well, what more can you ask for, really?
Yeah,
Like,
what more can you ask for?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I do want to ask as well about because I always ask this as well. What do you like to do in your spare time?
I love connecting with people. I'm a real people's person.
Right.
I just love chatting, and I have a great group of friends that have been just so supportive with me over the years, and I love connecting with them, family and friends. I love being outdoors,
Yep.
being by the water. The water really draws me. Um, Sea dipping, not really sea swimming, sea dipping when it gets a little warmer.
Mhm.
And I love writing, and running and exercise is a big one for me as
Yeah.
well. Exercise is a big one for you as well, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
huge. Like it's when I can I broke a rib a couple of weeks ago, and since when it's taken away from you, I think
yeah,
sometimes when you're just in the because I work in the gym, so
yeah.
I'm there all the time, and obviously
Okay,
training there as
yeah,
well. It's constantly like I'm constantly there, and then I'm training, I'm
yeah,
seeing people train. But when it's taken away, you really notice. And I had to, like, that was part of it yesterday. I think that whole my mind was just racing, and even that I just got out for a walk, and I had to kind of relax in the walk and like be
mm,
mindful in the walk.
yeah.
But I do think you like running and anything like that is so helpful for people if they can get out and do it.
Yeah, oh, it really is. And I find running has been great for me because you just throw on your runners and you just go.
Yeah.
Because I'm great at making excuses. I
Okay.
would say, oh, the gym, oh, it's 10 minutes away from me, but
Yeah.
10 minutes away from me, the traffic, different things. But yeah, the running is great for me.
When you say you like to be by the water, why do you think that is? Because like I'm from an inland county, and you're from an
Yeah,
inland county.
yeah, I
Why
am.
why do you think it is the water is such a pull?
I just feel so calm by it.
Yeah.
And I just take off my shoes, take off my socks, and walk along by the water. And I feel it so grounding.
Yeah.
And I'm always drawn from it. The other day, we just decided to go off one night, and it was to the water I was drawn to again. And I find as well that I actually I would go myself. I love being around people, but I really need my own time as well.
Hmm.
So I would take a spin myself and go to the water, or go for a walk, or do different things myself as well.
I would agree like wholeheartedly on that because, and I think maybe it has partly to do with the environment that I work in. There's like a lot of people there, and
Mm,
you're having different conversations all day with people, like, because I'm working there, and and I teach kids in there as well. So,
yeah. Oh,
we
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we have kids jujitsu classes and stuff. So, it's constant like people
Yeah.
around. So I think I appreciate even more now. I always like my own company, but even more now, I kind of that, the idea that you said, like just getting, on the bike for me and just
Yeah.
cycling somewhere and being away from it
Yeah.
and just appreciating that time too, because it does give you time to sort stuff out. Like if you're in a good place in particular, and hopefully you would be, but I think that gives you great time to sort things out when you are in a good place, because you're not worried and panicking about stuff. You're just trying to, almost file these different things away that you have to do.
Yeah.
And I do think that I know some people don't like their own company, and that's fair enough as well. But I just think that it's so important that we have that time to ourselves.
I'd go away on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go away. I went away there a couple of months ago just for 2 nights, and I really enjoyed it. I just bring a book with me. I bring my notebook, obviously, as well, and I just explore the different places, and I just really enjoyed it. And then a couple of years ago, I went to Berlin for a few days on my own as well, and I just really enjoy
Yeah.
just my going around myself. Yeah, I
It
really
just,
enjoyed it.
it feels like a little bit of a treat, like
It does, yeah.
because like, and again, you're working with groups of people, like, and that's maybe part of the reason. I'm not sure, but for me, maybe that's part of the reason that it's groups rather than, if you're working with individuals, it's a lot different. But just when you do, like, even when I come up here, and no, my mum lives here, but even when I come up here and I just go like for a walk or go for a run or whatever, and you're on your own in a kind of place that you're not going to bump into anyone. I think that's another thing.
Yeah.
Again, that's not, even if you're a people person, it's quite nice to go somewhere where you're not going to be recognized or bump into people as well. Well, that's what I think. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'd agree. It is nice.
Yeah.
I like going to different places. Yeah, I really do.
And I need this is not the most important question, but it's important important in regards to people following up on this. Where can people find you, Bernie?
So I am the Meaningful Moon Tour
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram, and I've my own website as well, where I share different information about the classes I run, and I share poetry there as well.
And definitely go to that website, and because that's where I found to write most of my questions from. But no, honestly, it's Bernie, it's been brilliant having you on, because look, this was something that hasn't been brought to the podcast yet, and anything that we can help anybody in general with mindfulness and things like that is one thing. But we've talked about so much to do with adult mindfulness,
Yeah.
that to kind of get to talk to you about, like, kids and creativity obviously as well to go with it. It's really important. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Derek. You're opening up so many conversations about different things. I just think it's amazing, and it
Thank you.
helps so many people. And I
Thank you very
always
much.
think, even if one person, it makes a difference to one person, that's just fantastic. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Listen, Bernie, just stick with me for a minute if you don't mind, and I'll
Yeah.
close this out. So I want to say thank you very much to John as well for doing the creative stuff. I always thank my mum, my dad, my granddad. My granddad was 96 the other day. Fair play to him. Jer and Calvin. Subscribe on YouTube if you would. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and then all the podcast platforms, particularly Spotify, Apple, and Anchor and Google Podcasts seem to be the ones that you're listening to that on. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I will not be in this room next week. I'll be back to the basement. The dark, I'll probably be better off there, to be honest. But yeah, but Bernie, once again, thank you so much.
But thank you.
And everyone else, see you next week.